So today we will learn, start learning the views. So we'll learn what is a view and then advantages of using views. So basically, view is a very simple concept. Nothing that's complicated about views. So what is a view? View is basically it's nothing more than a saved SQL query. A view can also be considered as a virtual table. Okay. Just if you remember, we have learned the store procedures, and we have also learned the temp tables, right? Remember the temp tables. View is another way of storing, let's say, like in temp tables, we used to store the result of certain query as a new like temporary table, right? In views, we will store the SQL statement itself. And it's usually select statement, okay? Basically, what you can consider view as the surface of SQL query. Okay? Like, imagine you have TV. When you watch TV, you only see the screen, right? Yeah. Like if there's a movie, you watch the movie, you only know and view the screen, but you don't know how it's actually working behind the scenes, like all this photons and neons and all that, and all the other technology behind it. You only see the view, right? Because that screen is covering all that other stuff that is inside the TV, and then it's just showing it, like showing you like I'm saying, result or whatever you say. So basically, that is what view is. View is nothing more than a SQL query that is covered in one place. Okay. Now let's see this in action. Let's create some views. Okay. So that you'll understand more how view works, and then we'll move on to where to use the views. Now, let's create a very simple view. Okay. Let's say, let's first select everything from customer table and see what we have there. Okay, so this is what we have, right? And let's select all from customer, where customer ID is say higher than, or actually no, there's only a small amount of customer IDs. So let's say where city equals to New York. Okay. So now if I execute this, this will only return these two values, right?
Yeah.
So basically what I can do now is I can store, well, this SQL statement, in this case it's select statement, in the view, okay? And then whenever I select some stuff from the view, it will return the same result.
Yeah.
So now let's create the view. So I'll put the topic, views. Then, so to create the view, you just usual, you say create view, okay? And then you give a name to the view, and usually the best practice or naming convention for the views is VW. This means it's a view. Just like SP means it's store procedure, FN means it's function, IX means it's index, so VW means it's a view. And again, you don't have to do this. You can give a view any name you want, but the best practices is you should start the name of your view with VW and then underscore, the naming convention. Okay. Let's name our view as VW and say customer. Okay. And then you say as, and then this will be your select statement inside that view. Okay. So now, if you execute this, this will be, it says command successful. And now I can select star from this view now, okay? But first, let's see our views. If you go here, you see, now we have a view. You see this? And now, I can basically select star from this view, okay? And it will show me this result, okay? Or I can select, say, customer name from this view, and I'll get the customer name from this view. Okay. So one more thing about, say, one more thing about naming, why we should name the view or any other things with a naming convention is, especially the views. Views are very similar to regular tables. Okay. Now imagine, let me create one more view, okay? And I will show you why it's confusing if you don't name the view as it is, as with VW, okay? So let's create a view now that's called customer. Basically, we are removing this VW. Say customer London. Okay, this is the view. And this will select customers from London. Now let's test this. Okay, it's selecting. Let me create this view now. So if you pay attention, like the name doesn't contain the word VW. Okay, just giving it a customer London name. And let's create this view. Okay, and now we have this view also here. And now imagine you came to work, and then you have this select statement. Select, say, all from customer London. Okay? And you get this result, right? Yeah. So you're selecting it as if it's a table because you don't have that VW in front. But then you want to see that table, but in the tables, you don't have that table. Yeah. You see, this looks just like a table, right? Just like you would select everything from regular, say, customer table. Okay. See, you can select whatever you want from a view also. It's just like a table. You see, the name is like a table. And it looks like as if there is a table that's called Customer London. But when you look for it, there is no such table. Yeah. And then you will be confused where the hell this is coming from. Okay. You execute the statement, you see it, but you don't have that table. Yeah. It's like a ghost. Okay. So, and you check, okay, I'm using the same homework database. I'm checking the same homework database. I'm checking the tables. Table called, interesting. That's why, so that people don't get confused, you should name your views with VW, starting from VW. So whenever I select, this say custom name from VW customer, now I already know that it's a view. And then if I want to see that, I go to views, not to the tables.
Yeah.
Okay? This has actually happened to me at work. Like, we apparently they had a view that they didn't follow the standard naming convention for view, so this view didn't have this VW part.
Mhm.
And then I'm selecting everything from that table because I didn't know it was a view because it didn't have this naming convention for the view. And I get the data, but I'm like looking into the database and there is no table. I'm like, what is happening? That's like impossible, right? You don't have the table, but you have the data. That's like impossible. I had to sit there for an hour to figure it out where this data is coming from.
Mhm.
Then it hit me, oh, okay, this should be a view. And then I checked in the view and they had a view that was named just like a table.
Yeah.
This gives you a hard time if you don't follow the standard naming conventions. Okay? Okay, good. So now let's go back to our topic. So this is how you create a view. You say create view as, and then whatever your statement is after this, and then your view will get created in the views folder. Okay? And then you can basically treat that view just like any other table.
Yeah.
Okay, but in reality, this is not a table. This is empty thing. Okay, this doesn't require any extra space.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
but you can treat a view just like any other table. Okay, so this is just like imagine that it's cover for select statements or any other statement. Okay. Now, as you can see here, they have used this join. Okay, they have joined some other tables and so on and so on, and then put that in a view. Okay, that is the usual case. Like you wouldn't store something like this simple in a view. There is no need for this, right? But if you have something more complicated, especially in reports, like for reporting purposes, say you have like multiple tables, you have to join and perform aggregation on those tables. You can basically save that script in a view and then start selecting the data from that view. Okay. Okay. Now, so why should we use the views? There are many advantages of views. So the first thing is views can be used to reduce the complexity of the database schema. Okay. So what does that mean? So in database, imagine you have like multiple different schemas. Schema means this DBO, or in this case we have this DBOs, right? Database owner. Any other type of schema, this will basically separate the tables from one another based on whatever your logic is. Like you might want to separate the tables based on your, say, if the table is related to customers, then you would have a schema called something like customer and then the table. Or if you have tables that are related to salesmen, then you would have a schema that's say sale and then dot and then table name, so that you can keep these different aspects of your business separate.
Mhm.
Okay, but when you have a view, you don't have to have that complicated schema. You can have all the tables in one schema, but then you can create different views based on whichever table you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might have multiple views and it doesn't take any storage, but you can have one schema for all of the tables. So it keeps it simple instead of having multiple schemas. Okay, the second thing is views can be used as a mechanism to implement row and column level security. This is, I would say, this is one of the most important features of views.
Hmm?
Views are mostly used for this purpose.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that they're not being used for others, but from my personal experience, I've seen views used for this purpose mostly. So what does this mean? Views can be used as a mechanism to implement row and column level security. Okay, so it means, now imagine, you have this, say, salesman or say customer information, right? Let's all from have this information about the customer, their name, where they live, and then we have their grades, IDs, and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might have even their addresses, phone numbers, and so on, all this personal information, right? Or you might have another table that's called employee table, and you might have information about all of your employees, their names, their phone number, address, and how much they make. Okay, all of this sensitive information. Now imagine somebody in the higher level, like in management or whatever, somebody asks for some information about your customers, right? They want to know your customers' names, let's say. Okay? But when you give, for that, you have to give them access to this table, right? The customer table. If there is no access for this customer table, they will not be able to even see this table, okay? Select anything from this table if they don't have the permission. Okay? But at the same time, okay, you want to give the information about your customer names, but you don't want them to see anything else. Like if say I give you permission to customer table, you only need the customer name, but since I have given you permission to this customer table, now you can actually see everything about the customer, right?
Yeah.
You can see their addresses, you can see their phone numbers and their all other features, which is not secure. Instead of that, I can actually create a view that will say, let's say, and I can create a view that will only select customer's name, right? So, and now I can name it customer name. And then I can create this view that only selects customer name, you see? Because that's what they need, right? I'll create this view, and whenever if I select star from, let's say, from this view now, I will only see the customer name. Now what I can do is I will not give permission to select anything from this customer table, the actual table, but I will only give you permission to this view. Okay, so now whoever is asking for the customer name will get only the customer name.
Yeah.
Okay, that the personal information, sensitive data is not revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is like one of the mostly used features of the views. It will actually a layer, like another layer on top of your tables that will protect the data in your table. And then you don't give people access to your table directly, but you will only give them access to the view.
Yeah.
Okay? They will only see what you want them to see. Okay? If you gave access to the whole table, they would have been able to see anything on that table, any information about your customers. But instead of that, you will create a view, and then you'll put inside that view only the things that you want them to see. And then give access to that view only. Okay? And I'm talking about the giving access and permissions, but I'm thinking you maybe it might be confusing for you, like we didn't learn that yet. But there is something called you can actually control the access to any object on SQL database. Okay? You can give access, permission, delete, select, or any other operational permissions to any object, to any user. That is what you will do. Like, you will only give permission to this view now, so that they will only see what is inside this view instead of seeing everything in the table. Okay?
Yeah.
The view will create a protective layer on top of your tables. Okay, let's move on. So, views can be used to present aggregated data and hide detailed data. You see? This is another feature that is widely used, especially in reports. Okay, so now let's say let's say somebody, your finance manager or whoever, asked you about say information about the customers. That is, they wanted to see the cities and the number of customers from each city. So that is an aggregation, right? So you'll say select, let's say, city as CT, then count star from customer, and then you need to group by what?
City?
Yeah, group by city. Okay, so this will aggregate, and let's say this will be this column. We'll name this column as number of customers. Okay, and now if I select, it will give me the cities and number of customers. So there's one customer from Berlin, one from California, two from London, one Moscow, two New York, and one Paris, right?
Yeah.
So, and now I can put this in a view again. Okay. Put this in a view and say customer by city. Okay. And I create this view, and now I can give access to this view to whoever that asked this information, right? So this means they don't have to go and look in detail for in that table. Only thing they need to see is the cities and the number of customers from the cities, right?
Yeah.
Because usually those managers and any other non-IT related people, they don't actually understand like SQL or any technical details. So you will have to give them what they ask. At the same time, also want to protect your data, right? You don't want anyone to mess with your table. Like you don't want them to delete your table. You don't want them to do anything with your table. You don't want them to touch your table. So therefore, views are very useful when you want to give only the necessary part of the data to someone.
Just to view, like in Word, in Excel, I don't have permission to edit it. I can view it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. You can only see it, right?
Yeah.
Then the beauty of it is that you can only allow people to see what you want them to see.
Yeah.
Ask for something, you can only give them that view. That's why it's called a view. It's basically a view from a table. Imagine you have this whole table, but this will views will give you a certain view from that table.
Yeah.
Okay? It doesn't give you everything from that table. It's only giving you a certain view from that table. Okay? So that is when it's very useful, especially like when you're doing some aggregations, and especially like when you're doing reports, for example. Like in this case, it's very simple thing. Like if your manager wants to see how many customers do we have from each city, you will just create a view like this, and then you give him this view or this script, and he will run this, and he has no idea what's happening behind here. Okay, he will only see this, and he doesn't need to know this like behind the scenes operations, right? This was his purpose. He got what he needed. That's it. Okay. Basically, you're saying, don't touch my tables, don't do anything. I'll just give you whatever you need, and that's it. Put that in a view, and then you only give access to that view. Okay. Okay. Now let's move on. And well, basically, to modify a view, you use again alter view statement. Drop a view, you use drop view and then view name. Okay. So we can also see that in action. Let's now alter this last view. Okay. I know it's like very easy, but just I want to also show this. So you say alter view and then the view name, and you say as, and now you will put altered version of your code. Okay, instead of say select city count, let's say instead of city, we'll say customer city. Okay? As of now, if we run this view, it's showing city and then number of customers. And if I alter this view, and now if I select, now it will say customer city, you see? Basically what happened is I altered the view, okay? And you can also drop a view. Let's drop this view that is not correctly named, okay? So now we have these views, and I want to drop this view that doesn't have the VW, okay? For that, you'll simply say drop view and then view name. And if I drop that, and if I refresh my views, you see that is gone. Okay, so I'll just put on a view, and then this one goes dropping a view. Okay, let's move on. Okay, this is it for the beginning of the views. Now let's talk about updatable views. So now these are just as you just saw. It's a view is like it just contains whatever the statement you have inside it, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And now let's talk about this updatable views. Okay. So you actually can is it like first thing that you should ask a question like, is it possible to insert or update or delete from the base table through the view? Okay, like let's see what first of all the question is now say I have this view customer name, right? And this view is actually using the customer table behind the scene, right?
Yes.
So now say if I want to update this customer table, can I do that through the view? That is the question. Okay. Basically, what I'm saying is, if I update this view, or if I insert a row into this view, will it reflect in this customer table? Because this view is actually using the customer table, right? So that is the question. Basically, if I do insert, delete, or update the view, will it affect the base table?
Yeah.
Or even better, can I update, insert, or delete the base table through a view?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is something called updatable views.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see, it's just like any other, you can do like update view name and set whatever department IT where name is equals to this. Okay. Like as it says in conclusion, if a view is based on multiple tables, and if you update the view, it may not update the underlying base table correctly. So to correctly update a view that is based on multiple table, instead of triggers are used. This we will cover like later. Okay. But for now, let's see that in action and see what happens. Okay. Let's we have this view customer, right? And if I, let's say, select all from VW customer, I will get the customers from New York, right?
Yeah.
Because this VW customer, this view is actually running this select statement, right? So select statement is being run by this view. So now, if you take a look at the select statement, it's actually selecting from the customer table.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what happens if I update the view? Does it reflect in the customer table? Okay. And let's try that. So we'll say update VW customer. So I am trying to update the view. Let's say set, let's say this customer name equal to, instead of Brett Davis, we'll say Brett, let's say Brett Davis. Okay. Or to be more precise, we'll say Mickey Mouse. Okay. Where customer ID equals to 3007. Okay. Now let's see what happens. So I execute this, one row gets affected. Okay. Now let me select all from this customer view again. See what happens. Okay. Now the view got updated, right? You see, it was Brad Davis. Now it became Mickey Mouse. Now let's select the same data from the table. You see, it also gets updated. So basically, you can update a table through a view.
Yeah.
If you update the view, it will automatically update the base table. But that can also be limited because you see, then it doesn't make sense because now you're trying to secure your data through a view, right?
Yeah.
But then if it's updatable or deletable or insertable, like if someone, whoever uses your view can also update your base table or whatever, then what is the point, right? So in that case, you have to restrict the permissions. Like you give permission to select data from a view, but you will not give permission to delete, insert, or update. Okay? Okay. And say if your view is using multiple, it has like multiple tables joined inside the view. And those
Yeah.
views, I mean, those tables have relationship, like they, um, they have foreign key parameter relationship. And if you delete one row or if you update one row in foreign key table, like the child table, right?
Yeah.
The like other table, some records might get like orphan records. Orphan record means you will not find the corresponding child in the child table. Okay?
Yeah.
But whoever is doing that will not know it because view will not show you what tables are being joined, right?
Yeah.
So accidentally, you might create data integrity issue. This is called data integrity issue. Okay. Um, yeah, but avoid that instead of triggers. There's a trigger. There is this things called triggers, and there's one of them is called instead of trigger. That is used to avoid this kind of scenarios. That we'll learn in future sessions. Okay. But as of now, what you should know is views can be updated, and when you update the view, it will actually go ahead and update the base table, whichever table is being used inside that view. Okay? So in this case, we actually updated this view, right? And this update affected this table, which is actually being used in this view.
Yeah.
Okay? We did not update this table directly, but we actually updated the view that is using this table.
Yeah.
And this table got affected also. So now if I select start from the view, you can get this Mickey Mouse, which used to be Brad Davis. And if I select the same thing from the actual table, the same thing. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh?
Yeah. I look. I see it like a little bit easier than previous lessons.
Oh yeah, views are very simple. Views are just like you can imagine a view as another table that's
Yeah.
basically captured from another table.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we'll learn about the index views.
Yeah.
So what is an index view, or what happens when you create an index on a view? First of all, let's talk about, well, as we learned the indexes, indexes can be created on tables, right? Like you can have all that cluster index, non-cluster index, you can create the index on a table. But can you actually do the same for a view? Okay. What it says is a standard or non-index view is just a stored SQL query. Okay, so that's what we just saw. View is nothing more than a stored SQL query, right? Like you can store your select over any other queries, and it just say a bag that holds your stuff. So when we try to retrieve data from the view, the data is actually retrieved from the base tables, right? So when we select star or select whatever from the view, what view is doing is actually it's selecting it from the actual table, right? View by itself is it's not like, it doesn't contain the actual data. Okay, it doesn't take up any storage or whatever. So it's like empty cover for actual table. So that is what we're talking about here. Like when you actually retrieve data from the view, the data is actually retrieved from the underlying base tables, because by itself doesn't contain the data. So a view is just a virtual table, and it doesn't store any data by default. So when you create a simple view, standard view, you can say like non-indexed view, it's empty. It's just a cover. It doesn't store the actual physical data. But however, when you create an indexed or index view, or when you create an index on a view, the view gets materialized. So materialized means now the view is now capable of storing data. Okay. Now it will actually physically store a data when you create an index on a view. Okay. So in SQL Server, we call them index views, and in Oracle, it's called materialized views. But there's no difference, basically. You call it an index or we call it materialized views. It doesn't matter, whatever. It's the same thing. Okay? Okay. And there's an example for indexed views. So when you when you create the index view, this is what we will do. So you say create view and the name of the view, and then you say with schema binding option. And then select whatever and so on and so on, and this is the view. Okay. Now from these two tables, this view is being created because of the select statement, right? Now when you select from this view, this is what you'll see.
Yeah.
So and there's guidelines for the creating an index view. So first thing is the view should be created with schema binding option. Okay. And then the second thing is if an aggregate function in the select list references an expression, and if there is a possibility for that expression to become null, then a replacement value should be specified. Basically, it should be null handled.
Yeah.
Like you remember, like in our very first if you think your statement inside your view, like in this case, it's select name and so on and so on. You think if it brings null values, then you should null handle it. You see, they are using is null function. Okay. Basically, you cannot have the nulls. You have to null handle it. And then third thing is if group by is specified, the view select list must contain count big expression. So you cannot say count, you can only say count big. And then the fourth is the base table in the view should be referenced with two-part name. In this case, they're also using the schema name. See, DBO and then table name, DBO and then table name. If you remember, this was the same case with functions. When you call the function, you should at least provide at least two-part name. So the same thing when you want to create an index on a view. Okay? So these are the four steps that you should consider when you are trying to create a view, index on a view. And you would create an index just like you're creating an index on a table. You see, there is no difference. It says create unique cluster index, and this is the index name. On, instead of providing the table name, now you're providing the view name. Okay? There is no difference as for creating the index on a view. Only difference is inside your view, your statement must follow these rules.
Yeah.
Okay? It should be schema binding, and it should be null handled. Okay, like you should use the isNull function so that it doesn't bring nulls. And then instead of count, you should use count big, and then the provide the two-part name for the tables.
Like schema binding, it was in inline function lesson, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Like an encryption, yeah?
Yeah. It's just like if you remember the store procedure was the with encryption. Now this is the with schema binding. Okay. So basically, what happens is if somebody tries to delete or drop any of these tables, it will not let them do that because it's schema binding. Otherwise, imagine if somebody dropped these tables, now your view is junk. You cannot use it view. Okay?
It protects, yeah.
Yeah, it protects. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is about creating indexes on views. Now let's see that in action. Okay. Let's try to create on, well, let's create first. Okay. Let's create this separate view. Create view customer cost indexed. Okay. And then now let's just, instead of all this, let's select star from customer and create this. So now we have this view customer index this view. So let me put the topic also. Indexed views. Okay. So now I can actually select star from this view. If it's working, okay, it's working. Now let's create an index on, let's say, on this customer ID column. Okay, we don't have any duplicate values here, I think, so it should be okay. So we'll say create clustered index, and we'll call it on IX view. Say index on, and now instead of specifying the table name, we'll give the, and then we want to create that index on the customer ID, right? So I'll say customer ID. Okay. And now let's try to execute this and see what happens. The view is not scheme. Oh yeah. Now you see, now we'll go back to these 4 steps. The first error, what it's saying is your view is not schema bound. Okay. Because we forgot to use the schema binding option when we were creating the view. Okay.
Yeah.
So now what we do is we'll alter the view now. So we will see each of this error one by one. Okay. You also understand. Okay, now we'll alter it. Alter the view this with with schema binding. Now if I execute this, And now the second thing. Second thing is you cannot have the select star, okay, in the schema binding. So now instead of this, so I will actually start putting this one by one.
Mhm.
And I'll say criteria. First, view must have with schema binding option. Okay.
Mhm.
Second, it can not contain star. Okay.
Mhm.
So now, okay, instead of star, we'll say, so what columns do we have there? We have this, this. So I'll copy that with a header, and I'll paste it here, and then I'll delete this part, and I'll cut it, and I'll paste it here. I'll put this here. Okay. And now we remove that star. We have the schema binding option. Now let's try. Okay. Because the name customer is invalid for schema binding, name must be in two-part format. An object cannot reference itself. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
now the third step was because table we have to provide the two-part name for this, right?
Yeah.
So say dbo.customer, and then I will put the third thing here. Base tables must have a two-part name. In this case, I'll just copy this and put it here. This not just customer. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Now we provided that also. Now let's try to alter it again. Finally, now we have altered the view, and now
Mhm.
we can create the index, right?
Yeah.
Now cannot create non-unique cluster index on view because only unique cluster index are allowed. Consider creating unique cluster index. Okay. So now it must be unique cluster index. So I'll add the fourth step. Index must be unique. Okay.
Mhm.
Index must be type of. Okay. So now we have actually an index on view. Okay. And if I refresh this now, and this was customer index, and if I go here, I have the index on this customer index view. Okay, so these are the requirements for creating an index on a view. And there's the other one also, the fourth requirement. Let's try that also about the count, right? Select customer ID and count star from this and group by this. Okay. Now let's try to alter this. See? Because no column name was specified. Oh, hold on. It's actually giving another error. Select all with schema binding. I guess count customer ID, the view, customer ID. We're grouping by this. Maybe function failed because no column name was specified for column 2. ID. Oh. Maybe function failed because no column name was specified for column 2. No idea what this is saying, but let's see. Oh, okay. We were missing this alias. Okay. Now, you see, now we have this count. Basically, we have the aggregate function within the view. Okay. Now, let me first drop this index first, and then try to recreate it. Okay. Okay. Oh. This. Yeah. I guess it already dropped it. Refresh. It's gone. Okay. So now let's try to recreate this. And just notice that we're using the count, not the count big. You see? What it's saying is, cannot create this index and so on, because it uses the aggregate count. So use count big instead. Okay. So now if we use count big, and let's alter this. If I create this index, consider adding count big star up. Count big should have stars. Okay, now it's created. Okay. So create and close index view on index custom ID. Okay, I guess it's not showing it. Well, let's refresh this and see this. Okay. I guess it's just the cache issue. But yeah, basically we created this index. Okay. So now let me also add this to requirements. If using aggregate function count, actually I'll say use count big aggregate function. Yes. Okay. The 5 requirements before creating an index on a view.
Count big is like different than count?
No, it actually does the same thing. It's also the count, but it's just like int and big int. The difference is in the size of the digits that it can store, right? Like
Oh,
int can, I think, store like up to, I don't know, some millions, but big int can store up to 2 to the power of 64. So you can have a number that has 64 zeros after it. Okay. Just like that, count big can count a lot more number of rows than
mhm.
okay, so now this is how you create an index on view. Okay.